First off, Louisa, tell me what made you decide you wanted to be a part of LMI?
Once I got the email that I was nominated, it was definitely an exciting proposition because I knew I'd get to go to Tanzania, but it was also, I grew up overseas, so going places wasn't as exciting to me as actually doing something about what I would see. So I wasn't exactly sure about all the particulars, but I got the gist that I would be involved in saving lives, but not just saving lives, but bringing Christ to the people whose lives you saved. So the opportunity to be a witness, and also I think the opportunity to get other people involved in what was going on was huge for me, because my parents are missionaries and their whole lives have been getting people involved in what's going on overseas. It's not just the missionary that counts, it's everyone who supports the missionary, and I think that's what this has given me, and that's why I really wanted to do it.
Tell me a little bit about what kind of things you were doing over there, and how you were able to make a difference.
Okay, well, it was a lot of taking pictures and a lot of saying we need to take things home to show people. But beyond that, we wanted to build relationships with the people. And what happened was they actually took us into different parishes. Because in Tanzania, the way Lutheran Malaria Initiative works is that they train the pastors and the teachers and the evangelists in the church about malaria. And then through the church, the people learn how to prevent it and treat it and stay safe. So it was just really cool to see how the community worked. And we actually got to sit in villages with Maasai tribes and eat their food, and we worshipped underneath a tree and with the people in, well, not even in Swahili, but in the Maasai language, translated into Swahili and then into English for us, just in our ears. And being a part of that, and for them to know that we care about them and we will continue to pray for them, and that we're brothers and sisters in Christ and we'll see each other someday in heaven, was basically the main gist.
Talk about kind of the culture there and the things you observed. Obviously, it's got to be a lot different from over here in the U.S.
The big thing that you notice is what's important. We talk about first world problems and third world problems. Most of these people are thinking about, I have work today so that I can come home and feed my family. And so it's difficult to explain, but it's just where your priorities lie. They're thinking about the next meal, or maybe if it's not the next meal, if you're better off, the next thing you have to do to provide for the next meal. And what we're thinking about, I have soccer practice in 3 hours, man. And culturally, what's important is huge. And also the communities are another huge difference, I think, is that there are a lot of the places that we went were very isolated, and it takes an hour of walking to get to the nearest town. So you have families who are literally carrying each other to clinics, and it takes an hour to get there, or taking a motorcycle to get there. And we did go to some places where it was totally off-road, just dust, and you make your own path in our 4-wheel drive van. So transportation, we don't think about it, but it's huge.
How were you greeted over there? How did they treat you as being an outsider?
Very well. I think there's a certain pride in Tanzanian hospitality, and they knew why we were there, and they knew that we were there to help them and to see how well they had already done with what they'd been given. because a lot of the problem with malaria is people just don't know how to prevent it and treat it, even though it is preventable and treatable. So what they've done with the resources they've been given, they want us to know that they've been doing a good job with them. So they did a lot of demonstrations of skits that Sunday school kids do with how to prevent it and treat it, and sleeping under bed nets and what the symptoms are, and songs, poems, and it was all very, very formal. We all sat up there and told them it was great. Mm-hmm. And it was cool because they incorporate their culture, their dancing, which I can't do, don't ask me to demonstrate. They're dancing into the spiritual songs, into the malaria into the spiritual songs. So
did you see many people that were actually affected by it, or
they took us mostly to places where people were sleeping under bed nets and where people had been affected by it before they slept under bed nets. And we talked to a lot of people who said, don't let anyone kid you that they haven't had malaria. Everyone here has had malaria. They asked us about how we were dealing with it in the States, and we said, we don't even have it, and they were just shocked. So it's that everyone's affected, and the places we went, no one had it that we knew of. But even our bus driver had it the week before, though. I guess we don't know the signs and symptoms as well as they do.
What were your living arrangements like, and what was the hospitality that you were given there?
We were very blessed to be able to stay in pretty nice hotels, and mostly there were a lot of tourists at the hotels, but they were run by Tanzanians, and it was cool because the relationship between the people who ran them and the people who stayed in them is a lot different from how it is here. And the main place we stayed was in Arusha, which is maybe an hour east of Mount Kilimanjaro. And that was the hotel where we had Andy and Lillian, and they were the runners, and they took care of us. So it was a lot of, when do you want to eat? We'll make food for you. And we slept under bed nets every night. And I'm not sure what else.
How rewarding was the experience for you? What do you take away from it?
Oh gosh. I'm still debriefing. It's only been a week and a half. But it's definitely the coolest thing I've ever done. I worshipped under a tree with a Maasai tribe. And I think that, what was the second part of the question?
What do you take away from it?
I think what I take away from it is a confirmation of the barriers in culture and in resources aren't important when you're forming a relationship and when it comes to helping people. And I think that the fact that we are helping them doesn't mean that, with malaria, doesn't mean that they didn't help me just as much in expanding my worldview, in realizing priorities, and it sounds cliche. Our God is a God of relationships, and it's so cool to me when the relationships that He makes possible on earth work, and that it doesn't matter where you're from or how many times you've been overseas. It's the reason why we care enough to do something about malaria.
You feel like you were able to make a difference? Is there a specific instance that you can think back to that stands out from the trip? Some kind of interaction you had with someone? It wasn't a verbal interaction, but there was
I can't remember. Her American name was Esther, and I don't remember her Swahili name, but I don't remember her Maasai name. But when we walked in there, into her house, and she showed us her bed nets, and how she said in Maasai, and then it was translated to us, that she had been sleeping under them for a year, and that her family hadn't gotten malaria in a year. And then I walked out of the house, and I was like, gosh, this really works. And one of the ladies who was traveling with us from the church, her name was Grace. She said, you're here and this is your first time here, and you're seeing how the work that's being done is working. But we're always here, and these are our friends. And we're so glad that you're taking our story back. And was convicting to me how important the work that I'm going to do is, and that she knows that I'm going to do it.
You feel like the experience changed you? I mean, how has it impacted you?
Worldview-wise, yes. You hear about Africa, and you hear about diseases in Africa, and you hear about culture, and you can hear about it as much as you want, but you can't read a book and become an expert overnight. And you can't take one trip and become an expert, but I think that it's definitely... Could you repeat the question?
Just experiences that impacted you, and how it changed you.
Changed me, right?
Yeah.
I would not be able to do what I'm asked to do on our campus, raising $25,000. I would not be able to do that with a full heart for other people. Maybe for my own glory, but not for other people, if I had not had that experience and seen what they go up against, seen that these are people who have to decide if they're going to take their child to the clinic that day or work that day so they can feed their family. And if I hadn't seen that firsthand, that I would not have the capacity to care enough.
Are there any other highlights of the trip that you can think of specifically? Any moments that you'll remember forever?
Yes, specifically, Rebecca, who also went here, she was sick a lot when we were there, and I was sick one of the nights, and it was one of those experiences where you're sitting there and you just feel awful, and you realize that other people feel awful with diseases, and they don't have the resources that we have. And I think that, she said, I just want my mom, and I was thinking about that, how the kids there, sometimes their parents just don't have enough time to care about them, and they're 5 years old, and I think that that's one of, being there and having just seen it, it was one of the things that stood out. It's like perspective on just even having a stomach ache.
Do you think you'll ever go back or do something similar to that?
I hope so. I hope to go back to the same place and reestablish some relationships, but I definitely think I'll be going back to Tanzania and hopefully some other places in Africa too.